Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to LinkedIn's Financial Services chapter, a roundtable where our topic for discussion today is reimagining the future of financial services. I'll start by introducing our team from LinkedIn. I'm joined together today with Grace Kerrison, who's joined us from Singapore. She heads our APAC business for LinkedIn Sales Solutions, and Ivan Romero, who heads our customer success support team in APAC. Before we go around the room, I thought we'll do a little bit of introductions, and the way we would like to do this introduction is a little different. Tell us a little bit about your name, your organization that you're from, and we'll add a little twist to it. If you all are CEOs today in respective organizations that you lead, if you had an alternate passion, what would that be? Our audience, I think, is going to be loving to hear something like that. I could start, and my passion was pretty much, I grew up in a very humble background in India. When education systems and value systems are given like that, you typically either become a doctor or an engineer. But then India is known for getting influenced by movies. So 1986 was the turning point. Top Gun happened. And my passion was to become a fighter pilot. And that's still a passion that continues still now. So I'll start with that and probably move over to you, Vijay.
Well, thanks a lot for having me on today's event and today's show. Delighted to be here among such a distinguished set of colleagues. Well, I work for ICICI Securities. I'm the MD and CEO there. And the stuff that I would have probably loved to do had I not been doing my current role is something interesting. I'm pretty passionate about men's fashion. I'm also pretty passionate about traveling. So probably I would have taken to being a blogger on men's fashion and travel.
Comes from somebody who's the best dressed of us all today.
For sure.
Ivan.
I'll go next. Nice meeting you all. As Avi says, I lead the customer success org in APAC. And I think if I was not working for LinkedIn or for any multinationals, I love cooking and baking. So I would actually go into like a chef or something like that. I think that would actually be my other job, if I could pick one, yeah.
Perfect, sounds good. What about you, Anup?
By way of introduction, my name is Anup Rao. I am the MD and CEO for Future Generali General Insurance Company. And thank you for having me here. After my high school, I'd applied for my bachelor's in journalism and philosophy. And I got admitted, and then I guess my dad gave me a bit of a dressing down, saying that you'll not have a career after studying philosophy. So I probably would have been a journalist. I mean, that's something which I was interested in. I like reading a lot, maybe a writer. I like eating a lot, so maybe a food blogger too. So a lot of options there, but something to do with writing in all probability would have been my career.
Thank you so much. Ritesh, if you could just ask the same question to you. I know it's a difficult one after being a CEO for 15 years.
Hi everyone, and thank you for sort of having me here. I work for HDFC Ergo. This is an interesting question. I mean, you stole my answer. But again, I mean, as I was growing up, those were the times when civil services was a big passion. I mean, people from middle class backgrounds, so I all wanted to run the country. But somewhere whilst I was doing my graduation, MBA was a big fad, and one got into MBA, and then that changed the course. And that's what got me in the corporate world. So it would have been, civil services would have been the other one had I not got into my MBA. And was doing a master's in something else.
Not bad. Grace.
Hi, I'm Grace Kerrison, and I head up LinkedIn Sales Solutions for Asia Pacific. It's wonderful to be here in India, and thank you so much for making the time to have a conversation with us today. If I wasn't doing my role today, my passion has always been about photography, but because I love traveling, it's probably around photography, looking at different places and featuring that on blogs and any other types of channels.
Thank you so much, Grace. Tarun, what about you?
Tarun Chugh, Bajaj Allianz Life. Well, I possibly would have the most dramatic career of all of these gentlemen and ladies here, because I wanted to be a dramatist. I was a stage actor during my engineering and discovered that passion. But I discovered it doesn't pay you much, so I didn't take it up.
Thanks so much, Tarun. And But I definitely believe in destiny. I'm not sure how and when we would have all met together despite having an alternate passion or a career if we had chosen that, but I'm sure we would have still met together today doing something else, probably watching your drama while somebody's clicking us and somebody's serving us food. Right. So I'll kickstart this conversation and set some theme around what is it that we wanted to achieve through today's conversation. In the next 90 minutes or so, what we wanted to cover is the challenges that organizations are facing, and with all of you as the helm of these organizations, you being pulled together by multiple sides, right? So there's macro conditions on one side, there is employee expectations on the other side, there is shareholder expectations, which is also heavily on you, right? When you think about all of these things, for you to be successful, it is definitely a lot to do with how you lead that organization. So it's about leadership. It's also about how do you build a culture which is resilient to take care of any innovation or any challenges that is thrown in the way, right? So with that basic foundation, what we wanted to do was touch upon our first theme. And our first theme of the conversation today is the macro uncertainty that's happening at the global level, but also what we're seeing in India, which might be completely different. We're not completely immune to it, but we're seeing a lot of things play out very differently. So Grace, if you want to just kick us off on that theme, and we can start from there.
Great. Thank you so much for setting the tone, Abe. The first part of our conversation is about India and the current global uncertainty. You know, in the last 36 months, we've gone from what we call work 1.0, which is before COVID, work 2.0, which is during COVID, which is everybody was remote, and now it's 3.0, which everybody is experimenting, hybrid, not hybrid. And then you couple that with the macro uncertainty, which to me is if I look at Asia Pacific, is showing up differently here in the region. And India is the bright spots that we see globally. And if you look at what OECD is saying, it's India is bucking all the trends and all the metrics. India is going to have one of the highest growth of any country in 2023, and we'll be doing the same in 2024. So as data and research and the news kind of suggests, there's something happening in India that I'd like to delve into in our conversation today. So what I'm going to do is ask the first question to Tarun, to Vijay, and to Ritesh on if you were to look back in the last 12 to 24 months, what would be your top key reflections? Specifically, what would be the highs and the lows in particular? If I can start with you, Tarun.
So it's basically COVID time, 12 months back or 24 months back, and that was a torrid period for everybody. But as an organization, there were quite a few highs, honestly. Ours has been going through the structural transformation for the last 6-7 years. And it just all came together around COVID. The whole team started collaborating a lot better. It is almost as if we were in a war room. The verticals started working like never before. We picked up a lot of contextual innovation because it was just by, I'd say, a sheer desire to succeed and make things happen and just kind of just make every day kind of make happen. And it was like that, right? Because every day was different. So we used to all pretty much meet the senior management about 3 days in a week and almost plan and replan and change course. And it was quite an agile time for us. And we were able to, we were the fastest growing life insurance company during that period. We came up with a lot of stuff that worked. Our technology came together to save us, despite life insurance being an area where you have to meet somebody. So we were able to come up with tech solutions which actually plummeted us into a different orbit, I'd say, and that's what has stayed with us. So there's a lot of highs on that bit. On lows, of course, 2 lows. So one is the fact that there was a lot of claims that came our way, and it wasn't an easy time. There were losses. But that is fine, that is for the right reasons. But the biggest low was we lost 22 people in this COVID period. So that was something that I couldn't really live with, because it was almost like a feeling of helplessness, and you couldn't really do much about it no matter what you did. You always feel that you could do a little bit more, maybe step back, and you could have acted a couple of days prior, but then that's how it was. But anyway, that was the low. I still sometimes, I'm not able to settle myself on that.
Thank you, and thank you for sharing, especially that last bit. I think, all of us, directly or indirectly, have been impacted of what happened during COVID, and I appreciate you sharing that. Vijay, if I can move to you and to give us your reflection, the highs and the lows over the last 12 to 24 months.
Actually explain the context. We come from what one would call a wealth tech industry, and just when COVID sort of set in, unlike the rest of the part of the economy which actually in a way shut down, the spaces that we operate went right through the roof. It just broke out. I think it was to do with multiple factors, including the fact that we were highly digital as a business, and since no contact style method of dealing was possible in those days, the digital access that existed through our platforms attracted a lot of people. So we saw record highs, whether it is newcomers coming into the capital markets, whether it is growth of volumes through the products that we offer, whether it is fundraisers through corporates. There was enough and more uncertainty, and lots of companies are wanting to stack up on capital. We saw record numbers, and this kind of a breakout that we saw was something that one would capture by saying that what probably the last 2 decades saw happened in less than 2 years. So completely breakout phase. And the high really for us was that we were positioned to actually capture a good part of the market share during that period. In fact, during this period, we managed to gain market share, which I think was pretty important. We were ranked number 1 equity house as far as fundraising was concerned as an investment bank 2 years in a row, 21 and 20 and 21. So we were able to capture, and I think that was a high or pretty satisfying. As far as the lows were concerned, we had a fairly difficult time managing sudden change, and I think the resilience of our staff, the resilience of our employees to ensure that when everything was shut, 9:15, we had to be right up there, sun, moon, rain, because that's when the markets opened. And ensuring that we were there right up there on the dot of 9:15 amidst so much of uncertainty with stuff that we did not know how things would play out in the context of a remote, semi-remote working environment. And I think the kind of changes that they went through was, I think, some challenges and difficult periods that they saw. We also lost life of some of our staff, we lost life of some of our clients. And that was another very difficult period during this last 2 years.
Thank you, Vijay. I think the common themes that I'm starting to see, and we'll go to you, Ritesh, next, is the ability to adapt, which I think has fruition into some of your highs. Technology really is like underpinning all that, but also the post-pandemic of the reality of having to build like that resilience during that challenging time. So thank you both. Ritesh.
Let me start from the lows first. I mean, very, very clearly in my working life, I've actually never seen an event which has been as painful as what we've seen during the pandemic. And I mean, the sheer loss of life that one saw, whether it was employees, their family members, whether it was all our sort of sales partners, their family members. So it's obviously been an event which has had a very, very deep impact in terms of what's happened on a sheer sort of loss of life. Looking at it from the other side, I mean, clearly a lot of people went into financial distress. I mean, larger corporates have still been able to cope well, but the smaller businesses, India is a land of sort of small businesses. The small trader has really suffered. I mean, and on the other hand, a lot of people who have just been slightly above the poverty line, unfortunately, may have slipped below that. So that's clearly been something. But having said that, I think the sheer manner in which India responded is something which makes me feel indeed very, very proud. I mean, whether it was the vaccinations, whether it was the way we went about the entire thing, I think that's a remarkable story. I'm on a few groups sort of within Ergo wherein there are international CEOs. And clearly that's something which probably India handled much better for a country of 140 crores the way we went about it. I mean, closer home and closer to our industry, I think the way our insurance industry has responded is again something which makes me feel very, very proud of to be part of this industry. I mean, you're paying 25,000 crores of claims for an industry which makes an annual profit of 5,000 crores. It is something which indeed is something which I always talk to everyone. The fact remains that we've paid out about 30 lakh claims as an industry. And I'm still not talking in terms of the non-life side. I'm just talking in terms of on the non-life side, which essentially meant that we potentially helped about 30 lakh people stay out of poverty. Very, very clearly so. The other thing, I mean, looking from what has been positive, I think two clear positives that I see. I mean, all of us love to talk in terms of how digital we are and what are we doing and in forums such as this. To my mind, this was the testing phase. Whether, I mean, all this technology that we were talking of responds. I mean, when suddenly one day you are asked to work from home, and as an industry we were supposed to settle all the claims. This was the time when people were going into the hospitals. I think as an industry, again, an amazing response that we were able to do. In fact, we were supposed to sort of come down on our TATs. What was 4 hours became 1 hour because hospitals were full of patients. So very, very clearly so. The other two things, I think sort of Vijay alluded to that. In my opinion, I think we took a sort of leap in terms of what we could do things digitally, clearly a 2 to 3 year head start on that side. And B, if there is anything known as a pull product in insurance, I think health insurance got closest sort of to being a pull product sort of over this period.
Thank you, Ritesh. And I believe our next part here is we had a view from Tarun, Ritesh, and Vijay on what that was like as far as the last 12 to 24 months looking back. And now I'd like to call on Anup.
Anup, I want to follow up on the macroeconomic challenges. We have heard, the impact from the past. I just want to understand how the macroeconomic challenges are showing up in your business and how they're impacting growth and planning.
See, honestly, India has been fairly insulated compared to the rest of the world, and it's not had massive implications on the way we have to plan. Having said that, I think one thing we'll have to realize is that a lot of companies will have to make decisions without taking recourse to data. For instance, COVID, which Ritesh spoke about, the fact is none of us knew how to price that product adequately. So if I talk about our company, for instance, our loss ratios were about 600-700% on COVID products. So we look at EVs, for instance, or autonomous vehicles. When there are these step changes, discontinuous massive changes, it's going to be very difficult for us to price for it appropriately, make the right decisions, strategize, go to market, so on and so forth. So when you talk about uncertainty caused by macro events, I think increasingly, while there's more data available, it can be used, for example, in terms of targeting customers better, creating micro segments, making sure that everyone in this room has got a customized product. That's possible with technology. But it also increasingly means that in this uncertain world that you can't use data as well. So it's a bit of a contradiction in terms in that sense. So the other thing is that just taking the contradiction bit, we all agree that technology is good, right? I mean, it helps you make better decisions, improves processes. If you look at technology, unfortunately, we largely look at operational efficiency and cost. But the fact is, it doesn't necessarily have a great impact on customer service or customer outcomes. Case in point, your IVRS, most customers hate it. You know, you look at chatbots, very few companies have figured out how to make that work. You fundamentally, customers gravitate towards companies which solve for three things. You know, they are cheaper, they save time, they save energy, they save money. A company like Amazon does a great job out of it, right? They tick all three boxes. Do other companies tick those boxes? Now, these are the challenges I would say, you know, are the ones that we'll have to cope with. Some of it with the changing, because the rate of change of uncertainty will only increase. We've been talking about it since the 90s in this country's context when we liberalized. And I think this conversation again will happen. There'll be the same question asked 2-3 years later, COVID or no COVID. And I don't think that's going to really change.
You know, Anup spoke about the rate of change and how that pace is only going to increase. And for us, as we've seen that happen in the last 36 months, as I said before, we went from fully remote to now experimenting in hybrid. But core to that is really what I've heard earlier on around even the push to technology or digital. It meant that the people that's at the core of your organization needed to transition. And that's really the next bit that I want to have a conversation is, you know, coming off of COVID, you've shared, the losses that you felt, that many people feel. And I think that's also was the impetus for the great reshuffle, the great resignation of the last 12 to 18 months. People started to think about why they work, how they work, where they work, and who they work for. And for many senior leaders like yourselves, we can think about it in the context of being adaptive. And you'll hear LinkedIn talk about it from adaptive leadership. And what we mean by that is these are leaders that think of down cycles as opportunities to really embrace, to get ahead and add value to customers and partners. It's also one where the ability to learn, iterate, adjust, pivot, and execute is really important. But the other thing that's attached to that is the ability to innovate. And I know that every one of you have done a lot of innovations in the last 24 to 36 months that we've just gone through. And I'd love to call on how you could provide our audience an example, just some of the things that you've done in your company. So, with this in mind, first I'd like to hear your thoughts about adaptive leadership, the innovations that you've seen your organizations kind of deliver, and why. What is the context for that? Anup earlier mentioned around the ease of doing business, the focus on customer experience, digitized or not. So I'd like to call on Tarun and Anup for this particular question, and I'll start with Tarun. Tarun, you recently stated that you intend to focus the majority of the next phase of your business around the 3 V's: video, vernacular, and voice, to outgrow your numbers with the aid of contextual innovation. Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Oh, so you've been checking on me, is it? Yeah, so see, innovation for us is a way of life, honestly. And for me is also a style of leadership. What I figured out is that the more innovative the organization, the more people get involved in this entire process of transformation themselves. So we've taken innovation to the ground. So we have this concept where even if you suggest a slight change in the way a daily process works, which could come from anywhere, we would want to listen to you. So we have this email called Listen to Act, where people can just write in straight to me and thoughts can come in there. And then we do it top down as well. We've got an innovation team that reports to me directly. The kind of stuff that we've done, honestly, there's of course video, vernacular, and voice, and I'll get to that. I think the one that really held us in good stead during COVID and even after, and is rated among one of the best in Asia, honestly, was was Smart Assist. It was a system where first time in the world a BFSI company actually used an app to HTML sharing. This is never done in any app. You see any app, you have to be within the app to be able to work. So we had a basic problem where when we were hit with COVID, insurance was all about meeting up with customers, and particularly life insurance. You have to fill up a long form, you got to understand the needs, you got to make something happen and make a pitch. And the most difficult was fill up a form, which is very technical. And all of this we could do with meeting up with a customer without really meeting up. So we could actually use your phone, and we could share our app where we would actually close a transaction with you. And Smart Assist was rated among the top 5 in the globe, actually, in all across. But it's top 5, so I can't really take any credit. Top 3 win the awards. And similarly, that's just one example. We had lots of things. Recently, our humanoid won something, and so on and so forth. So there's pretty much every part of our process now is bubbling with innovation. When it comes to video, vernacular, and voice, see the thought behind that is really India is not a country. I believe India is a continent, and there is, even if you try to segment India, it's not ever going to be one India. It's like 6, 7, maybe 8 Indias in the way you look at it. And vernacular hence becomes very critical. Video itself is so essential that that's become the way of life. You see youngsters making a living out of it. And ultimately your voice is what you want to hear, right? So Anup talked about some chatbots. Well, I think ours works quite well. And we've recently taken it on voice. So, and I know there's a chat GPT also coming up somewhere, and I won't talk about that, but we have more simple stuff here where it works. So when we look at any problem, we try to not get something to innovate which will go and win some awards. We just want something that is contextual to here and now and solve, whether it's small or big, any shape and size of problem. And one big problem for us is how to customize to each customer in India. And that's not an easy one. So hence the 3 Vs.
Thank you, Tarun. I like what you called out, that India is a continent, not a country, and how important the vernacular lens to put in. And as you look at it from what you said about solving the challenge from a contextual perspective, and we'll talk about it a little bit later, and Arvind's going to lead the conversation, it's, if you were to look at LinkedIn's membership in India, that's 100 million members right now, professionals and students that are fast approaching. 70% are millennials and Gen Z. And what you've just described is really giving us a view of the focus from your organization of the changing requirements of your customer. Thank you for that. Anup, if you could help me understand how you think about adaptive leadership, and in doing so, just some of the innovations that your organizations have also taken to market.
Sure. So I do believe that for innovation to thrive, we have to be adaptive and flexible. I think that's really the important thing, because being flexible and adaptive to some extent creates a sense of autonomy among the employees and among the other people in the environment. So if I go back to the COVID example, we called out pretty early that this is going to happen, this is going to last for a long time. So we actually shut down our offices much before the government called for a lockdown. So we shut down in the first week of March in 2020, and that kind of helped us, right? That autonomy, that agency people had, for their own productivity, helped us grow. We grew 2 times the industry. COVID ended up being a differentiator for us in a good way. One of the things that we philosophically believe in is that we should be an employee-first organization. So we don't say we are customer first, we don't say we are channel partner first, we don't say a vendor first, we say we are employee first. We fundamentally believe that in case with the employees at the center of everything, the rest will follow. I can't imagine an organization which says, I'm very customer centric, but doesn't treat the employees well. I mean, it just doesn't work that way. So that's fundamentally important for us. Linked to that, we have done a lot of things around, what we call diversibility, getting people with special abilities to join our organization. We are very strong on DEI. We do celebrate pride events with a lot of enthusiasm in our company. We do want people with different sexuality, different orientation to join us. And some of that has played out, right? We put the employee at the front of it. We are, at this point in time, the only company in India which offers a health floater policy for a same-sex couple. Our pet insurance product, the design came from within the organization. So, my strong belief is that in case you put the employee at the center of everything and they enjoy what they're doing every single day, you're going to get a lot of this happening automatically. So that's one context I just wanted to provide.
That is wonderful, Anup, putting employees first, and that's how innovation is fostered. And thank you for also sharing how through embracing difference and embracing diversity, that innovation is starting to bring about and deliver to your go-to-market and some of the services that you're offering. And I think that Tarun also touched on that around the innovation. I think you called it Listen to Act. And thank you both for sharing how you're focusing internally, because it does boil down to the employees and how you empower them to innovate. I'd also like to call on Vijay, because I know that you have shifted your business strategies and you touched on you're in the wealth tech kind of industry. But clearly there was a brand perception of being a brokerage house. And so could you tell us a little bit about how you're going about in changing that perception, but also, again, as being adaptive as a leader and driving innovation within your company?
Sure, indeed. In fact, in our case, our industry was going through and is been going through disruption even before COVID actually broke out. So innovating, transforming was not really a good thing to have for us, it was a compulsion. And actually we are coming from that frame and plane. We've been historically, as you rightly said, an e-broker. That's been our historical stance, positioning in the market. And we could clearly see that the face of competition was changing. And simultaneously we could see regulatory pressures and the entire landscape becoming far more intense, which meant that unless and until you have the ability to invest in technology, very difficult to meet the expectations of regulations and manage the costs effectively. But at the same time, we could see that there was massive undercurrents of underpenetration in our business, and that was throwing open a big opportunity. We took 3 important decision points, or 3 pivots as we call it. The first important pivot for us was pivoting to open architecture. Historically, we've been a company which has acquired a single bank customer, which means that to become our customer, you had to be customer of our parent bank. Digitization had thrown the gates open for us to look at beyond that. And we latched on to that development, and we pivoted to open architecture and acquisition of customers. To my mind, it may appear as a small step, but just think about it. Our parent brand in the liability market space, the account space, would be less than 10% market share. For 20 years, we've operated as a company which focused only on 10% of India. To me, it was liberating because you're actually focusing on 90% of India now, because you could be bank agnostic to become our customer. It was a very big leap. It was not as easy as I make it appear to be, because lots of things had to be cleaned up at the back end, including getting the leadership to see the opportunity within the group. The second important step that we took is pivoting to what I call a modern digital company. ICICI Group by DNA has been always a strong technology player. But to my mind, so many developments were taking place. it was not about just sticking to your roots of being a strong technology player, but pivoting to become what I call a modern digital player. And there's a difference to me as far as being a modern digital player is concerned and a strong tech player is concerned. So many of the things that Anup was highlighting, experiences, I think that's where a modern digital player can actually overcome, give a cutting edge experience to it. I've seen that he's very right when he pointed out, I think the BFSI space has a way to go, but I think the consumer tech industry has sort of shown the way as to how cool the experiences can be when you digitize from a customer lens. So I think that was the second important pivot to a modern digital archetype on a strong tech platform. The third important pivot to us was the way we started covering our customer. We had a very product-centric coverage model. So it was largely focused on talking specific products that were assigned for the relationship managers to converse. That became customer-centric, which means that you do what is right for the customer, focus on what fits his appetite, his life stage. Again, it meant reskilling, it meant culture change, it meant adding products that you can offer across life stages, going much beyond traditional e-broking kind of products and broadening the proposition to the entire savings, investments and wealth space, the entire protection or insurance space, because there are times in certain stages in the customer's life when he's thinking about protecting his assets, health or life or borrowing. It's a very natural adjacency for us. There are times when he wants to uplift his life, borrow for a home, borrow for buying a fancy car or simply borrow. Those were some of the solutions that we started introducing. So it was customer-centric coverage and broadening the product basket. So I think these three important pivots were made. It really helped us increase the width and depth of conversation with the customers. Change of perception is easier said than done. I think we are still a WIP company as far as that is concerned. We did not talk too much about it in the past 3 years because we needed to first build the stack before you start talking. I think today we are at a stage when the stack is ready. You can see green shoots coming out of the areas that we have built. Just to sort of make a point here, equities revenue, broking revenue used to be few years back more than 70% of our total revenue stack. We've gradually managed to reduce our dependence on that. So today it is less than 40%. And during this period, we have doubled our revenue. So you can really imagine that everything else outside of equity has been growing at a much faster clip. Now that we see green shoots, therefore, it is time to also start articulating it more vocally in the popular media that we are where we are today as more like a wealth tech player. I think this journey of transformation for us is going to continue because from here, where do we go? We are seeing two very clear opportunities, the rich Indians and the young Indians who will get rich. We find that the young Indians, you alluded to millennials, I would say the younger millennials and Gen Z, think very differently, they are wired very differently. They need to be approached in a language that they understand, they appreciate and they can relate to. I think most companies are far from that. We have to make lots of strides. We are in the process of discovering that language, that communication format. So we are in the process of approaching with a very fresh proposition to the young millennial and the Gen Z through a new brand, a new proposition, which is probably going to be unique. It's again, I would say a WIP story for us. And therefore, as we look forward, from a customer segment coverage perspective, we see two clear segments, the young emerging Indian who is going to become rich in the future and the rich Indian who's already sitting on a pile of good amount of wealth that he's generated. And from a product proposition delivery stack, we want to emerge to become, across financial services, which is equities, wealth, investments, savings, protection and insurance, and the lending product. So in a way become like a marketplace, a new financial services marketplace for these two segments of the market. So that's where we want to head to in the next few years.
Thank you, Vijay. If I can just recap, just some of the common themes that I've heard from Tarun, from Anup, and from you, Vijay, is a couple of things, and we're finding this across Asia Pacific as well. Is I think that there is a new demographic in both who's going to be in the workforce, but also who's going to be your customers. That's come into the to the market right now, and I think India is leading that, and the world's going to be learning from how you focus on like that customer centricity in that new demographics. The second thing is the notion of everything really is underpinned by technology in the way things have changed and in your offering. But it's how that's actually consumed in a way that is also a great customer experience. But there's also like the focus on the talent within your organization. And Ivan's going to cover this a little bit later. But one of the things that that I've seen is that, and we talk about this from LinkedIn, is that even if you do nothing, and even if you're not changing jobs, your job's changing on you. And the examples that you provided us this afternoon around the need for reskilling, the need to transition during COVID, but even post now, as you think about your go-to-market strategy, the demographics that you have are really pointing into that adaptive leadership and being able to focus on the talent that's in the organization today to build a resilient and an agile organization. Because as you said, Anup, is the pace of change is really the norm that we're going to have moving forward.
Perfect. I think +1 to everything that Grace said, but I was smiling when I heard a couple of answers, and I'll tell you why I was smiling. Preparing for this conversation today, I asked my 11-year-old daughter yesterday, what do you want to do when you grow up? What is your passion? The first thing that she says was, I want to be rich. So when you talked about the fact that there is a demographic population that wants to be rich and probably has every opportunity to be rich, I think that just talks about the new India. And you had me when you talked about the pet insurance part. I have 3 dogs, so that just had me. So +1 to everything that Grace talked about, but these 2 things stood out for me.
Are they insured?
They are not, but believe you me, I think coming out of this session they will be.
I hope so.
If I can just add as well, what we're seeing globally and definitely here in the region is, we are in another inflection point when it comes to asset under management. Because really from now until 2030 is that once in a lifetime generational switch, and we go back to, is the relationship manager that my parents have the relationship manager that I want to have, and it's even more important than that, the people that we have in our organizations today really understand what are the key things that's important to where that inheritance is gonna go to.
Yeah, and I just wanted to just go a little deeper on this topic of this, specifically this sector, and I know Anup talked about employee first, but I think what this industry does and this specific vertical does is think about country first, and especially stuff that you talked about in terms of getting a lot of people above poverty line, people who could have easily gone below. I know today, and I was looking at a couple of posts that you had, Ritesh, in the past that you've made. This industry in the last 20 years has evolved, right? If you look at life and non-life, both the industry in the last 20 years has evolved. We're still not as per what the global standards are. We're still way behind what APAC averages in terms of GDP. We're still way behind what the global standards are. We still have so much potential, however, to grow. 1 out of 3 households are not currently insured. So 1 out of 3 people in the country are not insured. So if you have to think about everything that we've done, which is all good, but if you want to make this like a pull product, if you want to make this into an industry which talks about protecting when you're down, as well as creating wealth when you're up, and a balance of these two, what do you think the industry should do? And if you can just talk a little bit more about how have you seen the industry evolve over the last 15 to 20 years?
So let me at least put some of the numbers into context. See, India as a country on the non-life side, our penetration from a general insurance perspective is about 1% to the GDP. And as you rightly said, the Asia average is about 2 and the global average is about 4. Okay. Having said this, I mean, so one way of looking at it is that obviously we've got a fair distance to cover and a lot of matrices point to that. But the fact is that over the last 20 years, we've grown from a 10,000 crore industry to about 260,000 crores this year. So, and this is over the last 22 years. We've grown at a 16% sort of CAGR year on year, when the nominal GDP growth rate of the country has been about 11.5, 12. Now coming to the good news is that I think as an industry we've actually been able to grow sort of at a delta of about 400 basis points to the nominal GDP growth rate. Now, I mean, very few people understand the general insurance industry, but a lot of people have a view on the economy. And if I go by the general perception that as the Indian economy will continue to grow at these levels or higher levels, and you are right, Grace, that I mean, at least the numbers for 2023 and 24 clearly suggest that India would be amongst the fastest growing big economies in the world. Now, this essentially sort of alludes to the fact that as an industry we will continue to grow sort of in the later teens for the foreseeable future, which basically means that this 2.5 lakh crore industry could roughly be a 10 lakh crore industry. I mean, sort of if I fast forward 10 years. So that is I mean, clearly something which is there. This is assuming we do things on a normal basis. Now, what we've also seen is that we have, I mean, the IRDA chairman is today talking in terms of the fact that there are these 3 pillars, and I mean, of awareness, of accessibility, and of affordability, which we sort of work on. And I mean, and these 3 things would actually sort of give kickers to the industry to move to the next level. A lot is being done in terms of ease of doing business. I mean, a lot has been done in our industry. It was also heartening to hear the finance minister talk of the same, sort of in the budget presentation recently. So all of this point out to the fact that I mean, while we've got a host of these under-penetrated numbers, and which very, very clearly is reflective from the fact that I mean, any catastrophic event which happens in India, if you were to look at the insured losses to the economic loss, I mean, we are still talking in terms of a 9 to 10% figure, which essentially means that 9/10 of the losses are self-funded. And I mean, this is obviously an area that we understand. I mean, there's nothing to be surprised about this, because this is also largely what the Asia numbers are. Okay, so it's not something which is India specific. So obviously a lot of scope to grow, but what we also understand, I mean, for us, I mean, the mutual fund industry is a role model industry in a way, because if we have to go out and address the whole issue of affordability, I think some of the core pillars that we need to work on is that how do we break the policy into smaller sachets. I mean, the whole SIP concept. I mean, see, if there is a health policy of 10,000 rupees and there is someone who earns 30,000-40,000 rupees a month, the month of the year wherein he or she has to pay the premium, the entire financials go for a toss. But if the same thing I was collecting as 1,000 rupees a month, would become very, very affordable. So this is clearly one thing that we move on. The second aspect that we move on is how do we contain fraud? Because that by itself is a huge thing, and I mean, as an industry, given the fact, I mean, we are an industry wherein we issue about 25 crore policies in a year. Okay, the average ticket size is just about $100. There are a lot of policies which are, say, under 1,000 rupees. So therefore, what had happened was that we had slightly relaxed the norms on KYC, given the fact that we had to reach across to so many people. But this obviously had some side consequences, which was some fraudulent practices sort of which were there. And starting January 1st this year, we've actually as an industry introduced the KYC. I mean, the figures may vary if you go around the table, but the fact is that we do lose to fraud, which basically means that the good customer ends up paying for the bad customer. So things like I mean, EMIs, things like sort of using all these fraud tools. And this is the one that will help sort of address the last of the three ones that I spoke of, which was sort of around the affordability. So this is something which is there. The other aspect which we work on as an industry is on this entire issue of insurtech, because one of the things that we sort of very clearly sort of go out and realize is and some of these numbers sort of go on and speak for themselves, sort of in terms of the fact that the number of claims that we have in India, we sort of settle claims grounds up, and a host of these things which are being done around, say, Bima Sugam, or host of these stuffs which as an industry things are happening at an industry level, things which are happening at an individual company level. All of these things go into essentially sort of go out and address that how do we settle claims faster. Just to sort of anecdotally tell you, we are a company with a 6.4% market share. Now, what is it that we do every minute on a 24/7 basis? We issue 20 policies. We settle one motor claim in this minute. In this minute, we've also settled 2 health claims. We've settled 4 other claims. In this minute, we've received about 20 calls in our call centers and about 64 people on our website. And we are just a 6.4% of the market, and therefore you can multiply it by 15 to just get an idea in terms of what is it that we do as an industry. Further, given the complexities of India as a country, when you're talking in terms of from north to south, being what about sort of 3,214 kilometers, or from east to west of 2,933 kilometers, our business language might be English, but that's not the language in which you are able to go out and do business. So our website is available in 4 languages. Our call centers take call in 10 languages. On WhatsApp, which is becoming a big medium for customer communication, we are able to talk in 12 languages. And this actually, in a manner of speaking, slightly complicates the entire equation, because anything that you wish to do, you then need to do that in 12 languages and whatever. But a lot of things are happening, and all of this does make me believe that we are well on our route to that 10 lakh crore industry that I spoke of in 2032.
No, I think thanks for putting context to the numbers. And I know we talked about some of these numbers because based on what you've already said. But Anup, again, the question back to you. You're building a franchise in the country, very similar business that we have. You're still looking at 20% growth in FY23. Ease of business is one aspect, but you also touched upon a very important aspect of at what cost, because ultimately you also have to think about bringing costs down, right? What do you think is going to be the biggest challenge that you might have to face? Country is growing, as what Ritesh also pointed out. The country is growing, and as a result of that, there's going to be some organic growth that will happen, right? Are you looking at some things which will help you grow faster? And probably what is going to be your biggest challenge that you might have to hit this 20% growth that you're looking at? Any plans that you would want to share?
So to answer your question, I don't see a challenge in terms of meeting our growth objectives. If you talk about the longer term, I think 2 things are going to play out, and one is organizational design. The second is how you target customers. So, like I was mentioning earlier, we haven't asked our employees to come back to office yet. We are still a hybrid workplace. We have been since COVID. I do believe that the nature of contract with employees is going to undergo a change permanently. Now, this may not happen in the next 2 to 5 years, but then I strongly believe that employees will sell their time with their own resources, with their own training, at their own place. And so it's very possible that if an employee engages with multiple organizations, more than one. It is possible. It may not happen immediately, but I think what we need to be conscious about is that that's what we are trending towards, and that will reflect in the kind of engagement and therefore the kind of output an employee would give you. That's one. Secondly, I think there's room to customize products more and more. Now, if you look at our industry on both life and GI, you have a whole bunch of people who buy a similar kind of product. If I look at life insurance, for example, because where I'm a customer, not a manufacturer, the general conversation we have is that which company is offering the highest IRR on a non-par product or a non-participating product. And I can't believe that for hundreds of thousands of people, we have the same solution. Frankly, we'll have to fix something there as an industry, not just life, but also general. I think that is where, AI, data, so on and so forth will come in, along with, our ability to make decisions where data is not available, but as a proxy. For example, when it comes to underwriting, could credit scores be a proxy for claims behavior? And, and some of us are trying to do that. So to me, companies which master these two things would have sustained growth. But talking specifically about the near future, I don't see a challenge in terms of growth.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Anup. We touched on the fact that this is also a very highly regulated industry, and the government does a lot of things when it rolls out budgets every year. And I know that we've heard from you, Tarun, in the past around the positives of the budget, but this time around there were also comments and articles that you had, your views around which I've listened to, right? So a couple of things that came out, in which I thought I'll ask questions to you about. How do you perceive this budget? Specifically on a couple of areas. One, pension being subject to tax, and the second is the fact that premiums above a particular value are going to be taxed as well, right? So any views that you have?
Yeah. So Abhay, the budget actually was quite a balanced budget. It was good in every aspect that you could possibly broadly expect. But I think the life insurance had a little bit of a dampener in this entire process. The big thing, of course, of pensions never really got touched, where pensions have been taxed and they continuously seem to get taxed and nothing else. So that's not going to help really. But yeah, as somebody just said, that things will keep getting taxed. So you have to live with that. And similarly, it kind of crossed on the pure life insurance saving products, where 5 lakh and above premiums are being equated with rich Indians, and super rich actually. And there they are getting taxed as other income. Now, I think this is a little bit of a tough one, because insurance isn't the first thing you get up in the morning and want to invest. So globally, whenever we've seen, there's been some tax break. And here, of course, we've taken a step back. It will hit the industry in a big way. This is a growing segment. We're all getting to, you heard around the table itself, Indians are getting to spend more, Indians are getting to get rich and richer. Now, we can't have a situation that we can be on a back foot for the entire sector forever. Hence, we're putting across our points to the industry, to industry bodies, to the ministry as well, and just hoping, with the fingers crossed, that something comes up.
I'm sure it will. If my daughter has to go rich in a few years, I'm voting for it. But on that note, I'll just pass it on to Ivan for our next theme, which is all about individuals in the company. It's all about people and talent that actually helps drive the actual business. I have a very famous quote that I read recently, was all about culture is not what you live and breathe 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. It is what you actually experience on a Sunday afternoon when you know that you have to go into work next day. On that note, Ivan, floor is yours.
Great, and I will also touch base on the power of data and technology, but I just want to pick up on something that Grace said before, just to give you an idea on the data that we have from a LinkedIn standpoint. And the reality is that out of the 100 million members that we have, 70% or even more comes from the millennials or Gen Z, right? It's a massive population. Actually, and the average age is 29 years, right? So that's again, Grace mentioned as well from a skill set perspective. I think our CEO keeps on saying the same thing. Even when you don't do anything, the job is going to change on you, right? So if we look at the skill sets, maybe like a few years ago that you need for a job, 29% of those skills have changed, and the expectation is that by 2025, 48% of the skills have changed, right? So when we look at that generation, it's clear that they're looking for different things. That may be like our generation. And the company culture and values are very important to them. They're important to us at LinkedIn, and that's something that we reinforced a lot, and I'm sure that each of you, if your own companies, have a unique value that you bring to the employees. But we have created here world-class employee experience that we all enjoy at LinkedIn. And we actually did a survey asking people, is like, what is the top priority when you join a company? And 40% of them said the company value and the culture are the top priority. And in India, that percentage was 39%, right? So again, that is what most of the employees appreciate. And looking at, again, a ranking in India about those top priorities in August 22, they said that the number one priority as well was compensation, right? The second was advancement, career growth potential. The third one was upskilling, right? Helping them just develop their skills. And the fourth, no surprise, is the work and life balance, right? So again, it is a generation that is changing, that they appreciate and value things that we may have not appreciated in the past. And also they have a unique skill set, and that skill set is changing based on the jobs. But I wanted to bring as well the topic of data and technology and how important that is becoming. I think we have all touched base on that. And the reality is that the Gen Z, for example, they're actually used to make decisions using data that maybe we were not used in the past, both discretionary and non-discretionary decision. Some stats as well to share with you. 84%, if we bring that technology and we put that in the lenses of like a sales org, 84% of Indian sellers said that they had lost a deal or delayed a deal in the last year because a decision maker changed suddenly, right? So the access to data and technology is becoming super important. The good news is that 87% of sellers in APAC are companies of more than 1,000 employees. They already use sales technologies at least once a week, right? So we're seeing that trend that is being implemented as well in all the companies. We all as leaders have like abundant data, and I think the question is how we use that data to make the decision that is more efficient. Ritesh, I wanted to ask you a question. You use a term, a very interesting term, ROPO, research offline, purchase online. I want to understand how you leverage all the data that your company collects, all those insights, to be able to align to your business KPIs, to be just much more adaptive than reactive.
Obviously, I mean, ROPO in the sense is research online and sort of purchase offline. And very, very frankly, I mean, what we say is that it is not really for us to go out and suggest how our customers should be buying. I mean, very, very clearly, we sort of call ourselves a channel agnostic company. The customer decides, what is the mode that they want to use to buy. The customer decides when he or she wants to buy. And therefore, I think as an organization, we need to be present everywhere. I mean, on insurance, it seems to be a very, very clear sort of output that a lot of people would go out, do their research, be it talking to offline channels, but increasingly, you Google, you find out the data that you want, and yet decide and go back to the channel that you're familiar with to buy. So this is clearly, one big development which is there, and therefore this brings us to the point that it's also important that we are able to give out the information such that we facilitate a prospective customer to be able to sort of make a choice. The other thing which is very, very clearly there is that there is a lot of data around, and while it's always a challenge in terms of what data do you use for to take a decision, but the fact is that increasingly, whether it is products, you're using data to sort of determine what is the product that you want to sort of come out with next. What is going to be your sales strategy? How do you go out and what is the value proposition that you give out? Be it on pricing, how do you go out and determine sort of what is the pricing that you would charge? And for us as an industry, I think one of the things which is very, very important, we've got hundreds of products as an industry. But frankly, I mean, is our product a motor product? Is our product a health product? Or is it a crop insurance? Or is it a fire insurance? Our product is claims. And I mean, a customer uses a product when he or she is in distress. And health, which is about 35% of the business that we do as an industry, more so, because I mean, the policy holder who's our customer, he or she or one of their family members is in hospital, sort of going through a personal problem. And therefore, I mean, it's very, very important for us to go out and use all of this data in terms of knowing exactly what our turnaround times should be, how should we go out and sort of service these customers. Also, I mean, this data is also very, very important because, I mean, I spoke earlier in terms of how big we are as a country. Now, somebody may buy a policy sitting in Mumbai, but the servicing may be anywhere else. And therefore, all of us need very, very large sort of cashless networks of hospitals if you are selling a health policy, a large sort of network of garages if you are selling a motor policy. So I mean, to my mind, data is something which is important. And finally, it's an annual policy. I mean, we also need data to know as to when is the customer going to renew. So I think data is all pervasive. We really, I mean, we still haven't got to a stage as an industry wherein we are really using what is known as a big data. We are still looking at our own data and trying to make sense of that. But I think that is the next step which as an industry, I mean, is on the anvil with the IIB, which is an industry body on data, sort of getting active.
And I think it's important what you say. I think the buyer behavior is changing as well. This whole research offline, right? We have now released LinkedIn the deep sales mindset, which is basically acknowledging that, right? The buyers have changed. The buyers research a lot offline before buying from you, and the windows to impact that sale is becoming much smaller, right? So I think it's very relevant. I want to transition to Grace to discuss with all of you how you're taking advantage of LinkedIn to your own benefit.
Actually, that's a good segue, Ritesh, around research, as you would say. It's, from my view, is even though we engage pretty much, with business-to-business companies, I have a lot of background in business to consumer, and I found that what's happened in the last couple of years is that the flow of how decisions are made in B2C now have many similarities in B2B. And so when you spoke about doing research first and actually having that information right in front of you before you even reach out, whether you want to talk and purchase online or actually talk to a relationship manager, I think there's now like that blur between B2C and B2B. And for us, the last question that I have for each of you is, and we see that on LinkedIn. So every minute in LinkedIn, there's 8,000 connections that are made. 8 people gets recruited. 100 million hours actually of LinkedIn learning is actually consumed, which gives you the power of people do want to reskill and learn from a knowledge perspective. And so with that, as the closing question is, Anup, Vijay, Ritesh, Tarun, I'd like for you to share, what would be 2 or 3 takeaways on how you view you're using LinkedIn and why is that important for you? Because I know you all have thousands and thousands of followers as you shared early on when we were doing our prep. I'll start with you, Ritesh.
No, I think what is very, very important is that we need to sort of stay in touch with our customers, be it the existing customers or our prospective customers. We need to be in touch with, in our industry, the war for talent or the need for talent. We are a people's industry. We need money on one side, but very, very importantly, we deliver through people. We don't have machines that work for us. We are not a manufacturing industry, and therefore people are really the core asset which is there. Now, how do you go around and ensure that there is consistency in terms of a thought process of delivery, consistency in terms of expectations, be it to your existing workforce, be it to the prospective workforce? Unfortunately, the financial services industry also sees a high turnover. Now I mean, so also in order to run sort of at the same level, you need to hire people. And I mean, as I said, as an industry, we grow. And when we grow as an industry, we need more talent. I mean, the industry is opening up. I mean, there are some 18 licenses which are being spoken of as we speak. And therefore, it's extremely important that, I mean, as an employer, we are able to maintain our connect. To my mind, it is equally important for a prospective customer or for a prospective employee also to know what she or he is getting into. And what better than to sort of go in and see as to what is the management talking of other than what is available on the website.
Thank you. Over to you, Tarun.
Okay. See, I've used LinkedIn more as a strategic decision. About 3 years back, I was hardly active. And last 3 years, I think I've been rather quite active. And it is like an expansion of our basic strategy that we use for our employees, which is from listening to act and responding to employees. Now, if you expand that universe and talk about employee networks, they're all on LinkedIn. You just mentioned the 100 million users of LinkedIn. So that is, if you ask me, pretty much the size of the employment population in India today. And using LinkedIn, we've been able to establish a strong employer brand. I don't know, I'm not going to be giving you too much credit, but I should give you a little bit credit for that. Last 2 years, we've been voted as best employers twice in a row, and great places to work, and never else in our history, in our lifetime. But it's only these last 2 years. And I think it has kind of coincided with a lot of things that we do. And LinkedIn becomes that media to reach out to employees, their own networks. Mind you, an employee has a network of other professionals who are on that network, and they talk to them. So I call this drip marketing, where every drip has an impact around its circle of influence. And that's how it tends to work for us. And to personify what the company truly is, it's pretty much the KPI of all the senior management to be active, to be available, to be themselves, and let people know if they like us, they join us. If they don't like us, they don't join us. And that's how we've used it as a system of expression. Before coming into BALIC, I used to use some other networks, but I found this possibly the most useful.
Thank you, Tarun. What about you, Vijay?
Well, I've been using LinkedIn more actively for the past, I would say, 2 to 3 years. 3 big, I would say, use cases, if I may. One is, I find it very effective to communicate with customers. So a bunch of our launches, new introductions, all of them find its place there. Second, we use this channel quite effectively to hire new people, so hiring talent. And thirdly, personally use it for gaining perspective, so listening to other leaders, what they have to speak and say, including competition. So it's a great place to pick up what's in the mind of people in the industry and what are they thinking about. So these 3 use cases for me.
Thank you. Anu?
Well, I'm not as prolific a LinkedIn poster as Tarun is, but I obviously find it useful. I mean, see, I don't know whether you want to call this a social media company or not, because there was a point that you made earlier, but honestly, I think in terms of quality of engagement and the quality of profiles, I think there's nothing as good as LinkedIn. So it's genuinely my compliments to all of you for having set up such a wonderful platform. I obviously follow a lot of people whose posts I find interesting. I do get contacted by a lot of employees from other organizations and customers, so I do find it extremely useful. I think it gives me an insight into what's going on in the industry and in the marketplace. Tarun spoke about, the organization being certified as a great place to work, and I think LinkedIn has played a role in our case too. We've been certified as the #1 GI company, as an employer, and as a great place to work for the last 4 years. And whenever that happens, I do see a lot of buzz in LinkedIn from a lot of employees. And I think it helps us magnify and amplify all that we are trying to communicate outside. So, but again, thank you for the quality of platform that you've given all of us. I think it's absolutely brilliant. And I think that's one of the reasons all of us are here on a Monday afternoon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anup. Thank you, Ritesh. Thank you, Tarun and Vijay. You know, we're very proud of what we've accomplished to date here in India for LinkedIn. Again, 100 million, which is the fastest growing globally and the most active globally. And I'm really happy to hear on how you're deriving value from the platform from a knowledge perspective, from an employer brand perspective, which is really important because, again, is people want to understand, as you said, Ritesh, is the company that they want to join, the leader that they want to join, and really the best place to do that research is on the platform. And the third piece is around the ability to communicate and reach both current and prospective clients. So again, thank you all so much, and looking forward to engaging with you more on LinkedIn.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.